Today we're going to be talking about lights and making sure that your race pace doesn't go down just because the sun does. If you've been enjoying these videos, please subscribe to the channel and share the content with anyone that you think would benefit from knowing a little bit more about preparing for these races. So, talking about lights, there's a bit of equipment that you're going to need for this lesson in lights. Firstly, we're going to need tape, electrical tape and strong Gorilla tape. I always use Gorilla tape. There's others available, but this has always been excellent. You need some Velcro. Pop down to your local haberdashery. Not only is that a great word, but it's one of the few places that you can get the Velcro that you need. And I'll have quite wide Velcro. This is the stuff that goes on the boat. And then also some slightly thinner Velcro in order to be able to best prepare your lights. You'll also need a foam block and something to cut it with, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Firstly, I use 4 types of light on the boat, 5 actually, I think, because we've got one that sits on the shoulder. So the snap light that goes on your shoulder, can't remember which side, that's fairly simple. I think you put that on when you go to the Thames, you'll crack that, it'll already be taped onto your shoulder, ready to go. And if you set that up at the start, when you get to Reading, it's a lot easier. Secondly, there's one that sits on the back of the boat, just a simple red light, I think it is. It might need to be a white light. Double check that. I don't know if it changes year by year. The rules will make it really clear. You're not using this light really. This is for other people to see you. It's a safety light. It's not going to benefit you on the race. However, there are 3 other lights that I find make a huge difference to my race. We've got the wide beam light. So we use this one in order to make life on the canal much easier. So this one, it's kind of got the ability to put the focus forwards or back, and it just opens up the beam or narrows it down. We have this one set as wide as possible for the canal. The idea being that the wide beam lights up either side of the canal for me. There are some sections of the canal, depends what the moon's doing. If the moon isn't bright, then it can be incredibly dark. And I want to know that I'm sitting in the middle of the canal in order to get to the deepest point. There's a lot of drag, as we spoke about before. So the last thing I want to do is find that I'm drifting closer to the bank and making life harder for myself. So I want to sit in the middle of the canal if possible. And this light helps me see where the bank is. And most importantly, if there's a turning I've got to take, I think there's only one significant turning on the canal. The last thing I want to do is miss that and waste any time. So I want to see where those points are. And I also want to be able to light up the bank as I'm coming into the portage so that I can see exactly where I'm going to be getting out. So this light is great. The problem with this light is the battery doesn't last the night. So this is where the foam block comes into play and a spare light. So I'll always have 2 of these because I've got to change the batteries. And because I've got to change the batteries on them, I have these handy Velcro comes into place. So this is the block that I use for the light. So I've cut it away, allowing the light to sit neatly on top. So this sits here and then Velcro over the top, Velcro over the top, holds the light in place. Great. Underneath my block is my Velcro. And this is ready to stick on the front of the boat once it's got the new batteries in it. And it's going to light up. When I start to see it fade, I'll shout to the support crew and they'll have the second block available with the other light on it. Rip one off, put the other one on. Bam, the light is much brighter again and I can see where I'm going. Second light, and also will be mounted on a block, is the narrow beam. It's just one light and this battery lasts fine. This one's great. Once I've got this one on, once it's turned, it will send out a much more narrow but much further beam. So this is the one that it still goes on the canal, but this is a much more of a benefit for me on the Thames. So once I've got onto the Thames, the wide beam ones aren't helping me so much. Sometimes as you're coming out of lock streams, they help, but this longer beam is much better for me because I can spot things a little bit further off. I'm just lighting up the next as much as possible, depending on what the conditions are like. I'm less worried about where the bank is because there's a little bit more light pollution as you get closer to London, so you can see much more. There's so many more lights along the riverbank. So getting into the middle of the river, knowing where you should be, is much easier. This is just giving me confidence and lighting up a little bit further into distance. But this light battery lasts all night. So once this is on, from when I turn them on at around Newbury area or whenever the sun goes down, wherever you are in your race, that one's staying on. Importance of these foam blocks is because we're going to change these as we go in order to keep the brightness high. And lastly, and one that does make a huge difference for us, is these button lights. And I don't see many people using these at all. However, these save a huge amount of time. I love the wide beam light. That gives me a lot of confidence. And so I definitely, is in order of my priority, the wide beam light firstly, because I can see where I'm going. Next one are these little button lights. These little button lights make a huge difference. When we did a training run on the canal once at night, back getting ready for 2015, we were just surprised how slow we were over the portage because of a lack of confidence in where we were running and where we were putting the boat in the water, because you just couldn't see. And we'd have the light on the front, great, you see where you're going to go, but you didn't have much confidence on where I was going to place my feet. I didn't have much confidence on, especially on the really dark ones, as I approached the water, where my footing was. When I reached down to put the boat in the water, sometimes you can't even see where the water is. You're just staring into a black abyss, and you drop the boat. I heard a story once about someone dropped a boat thinking they were in a lock, and the water wasn't there. The water was at the bottom of the lock, and they needed to run further, and they ended up dropping the boat about 10, 12 foot as a result. Well, these make a huge difference, these little button lights. So have these armed at the start, and you line them up along the edge of the boat. So behind the front cockpit, behind the back cockpit. We've got a handle on the back of the boat as well, so put those facing down there. And when you get to your support crew, where you might do a kit change, or just as the sun starts to drop and it's getting dark, and you'll just turn all of these little lights on, and they just face them down. And the reason why you need the tape, obviously you want to attach it to the boat in the first place, but once it's attached to the boat, I'll also put an extra bit of tape over the light itself. So I'm sticking them on here so that I don't see it when I'm paddling. So that's going to stick to the side, but this extra bit of tape, when I'm paddling along, I don't see it. I'm not staring at it the whole time if I'm the back person looking at the front little lights in front of me, but they're still facing down. And the reason why I need these facing down, it helps on two factors. If you're running, you get to see a little bit better where you're placing your feet, because you've got these lights facing down where you're running as well. When you get close to the water's edge, it gives you confidence in where you're placing your feet. So that's the first main factor. But the second main one is it lights up where the water is. It shines back at you. So you've got so much more confidence where you're placing the boat, especially in those dark canal sections. Or in the Thames as well. You're going to be paddling through the majority of the night. Most people's races, you're going to be going through the entirety of the night. As you place your boat in, you've got so much more confidence where you're putting it. So these things are going to make a huge difference. One long beam, one wide beam, and the button lights all the way along. Best of luck, guys, and keep it up.